Cincinnati, Cincinnati, we are home.
There was a weight to Cincinnati in the 1970s. Not heavy in a bad way, but grounded. You felt it the moment you stepped outside. The city didn't sprawl flat like most Midwestern places. It rose and dipped, folded into itself. Hills forced neighborhoods to stack on top of one another. Brick buildings held warmth in the winter and breathed heat in the summer. The Ohio River carried a damp, metallic smell that mixed with diesel, brewery yeast, and wet concrete. Cincinnati was a city you didn't just live in. You inhabited it, physically. It sat on a cultural fault line, officially Midwestern, but with Southern undertones that showed up in accents, manners, and pace. People said "sir" and "ma'am" without irony. Sundays slowed the entire city down. There was a politeness that masked toughness, factory toughness, river toughness, immigrant toughness. This was a place built by Germans, Appalachians, black migrants from the South, rivermen, machinists, and craftsmen. Old roots ran deep, and nobody pretended otherwise. Change came slow here. That was part of the identity. Cincinnati wasn't chasing trends or trying to impress outsiders. It wasn't Chicago, wasn't Detroit, wasn't New York. It didn't need to be. Families stayed. Grandparents lived a few streets away. Last names carried weight. Neighborhoods remembered who you were before you did. There was comfort in knowing where you belonged, and pressure in never really escaping it. In the 1970s, Cincinnati still felt intact, not untouched, but whole. The downtown still mattered. The river still mattered. The factories still hummed. The streets felt purposeful. You could sense that the city had a role in the country, even if it wasn't loud about it. It was a working city, confident in its routines, secure in its rhythms. There was no constant anxiety about the future yet. No obsession with reinvention. The assumption was simple. Tomorrow would look a lot like today, and that was fine. You worked, you raised a family, you went to church or the bar, you watched the Reds, you stayed put. Cincinnati in the 70s didn't feel like a place waiting to be saved. It felt like a place that had already figured itself out. That feeling. The hills, the brick, the river air, the slow confidence, is what people who lived there still remember. Not a golden age exactly, but a solid one. A city that knew what it was, even if it didn't yet realize how much of that was about to change. In 1970s, Cincinnati work wasn't a question. It was a given. People didn't talk about finding their passion. You found a job, and the job found you for the long haul. The city ran on routines, and those routines ran on steady paychecks. You woke up early, punched in, came home tired, and did it again. There was dignity in that cycle, and most people trusted it. Procter & Gamble sat at the center of it all, quietly anchoring the city. If you didn't work there, you knew someone who did. Offices full of chemists, managers, and lifers who expected to retire with a gold watch. Around it orbited breweries, machine shops, warehouses, printing plants, river terminals, and manufacturers that fed off the Ohio. Barges moved slowly but constantly, carrying the sense that commerce here was old, tested, and reliable. Union jobs gave structure to life. You knew your hours, you knew your benefits, you knew what you'd make next year and the year after that. One income could support a family. Not extravagantly, but securely. A house in the neighborhood, food on the table, a car in the driveway. Maybe a vacation down south if things were good. Stability wasn't a buzzword. It was normal. The city wore the costs of that stability without much complaint. Smokestacks marked the skyline. The river wasn't clean. air carried grit. Buildings aged instead of being replaced. Nobody called it decay yet. It was just industry doing what industry does. Progress had a smell, and Cincinnati accepted it as the price of consistency. What made the city unique was how little it bragged about its power. Cincinnati wasn't loud about its output, its corporations, or its workforce. It didn't sell itself as a titan. It functioned as one. A quiet power city. Dependable, disciplined, and unassuming. The kind of place that didn't panic when national trends shifted, because it believed its foundation was too solid to crack. And for a while, it was. People trusted the system because it had never betrayed them. You worked hard, you stayed loyal, and the city held up its end of the deal. In the 1970s, that agreement still felt unbreakable, even as the first hairline fractures were beginning to form, unnoticed beneath the hum of the machines. Cincinnati in the 1970s was less a single city and more a collection of small worlds stacked together. Your neighborhood wasn't just where you lived, it was who you were. People didn't drift far from their blocks, and they didn't need to. Everything that mattered was close. Church, school, the bar, the bakery, the corner store. Life stayed local, and that locality created loyalty. Over the Rhine still breathed then, though it was already aging. The buildings were old, but alive. Crowded apartments, corner taverns, families who had been there for generations. It hadn't emptied out yet, hadn't become a problem to be solved. It was simply a working neighborhood, worn but human. Elsewhere, places like Price Hill, the West End, Avondale, and Mount Adams each carried their own gravity. You felt the shift when you crossed from one to another, in accents, storefronts, churches, even the way people looked at you. Churches anchored time, bells marked Sundays, fish fries filled Fridays, festivals filled summers. Corner bars served as unofficial town halls, where news traveled faster than the paper. Bakeries opened early and closed when they sold out. These routines weren't nostalgic then. They were practical. They made the city legible. You knew where you belonged and what was expected of you. People lived inside neighborhood bubbles, and there was comfort in that. You didn't need to know the whole city, just your part of it. Kids played outside until the streetlights came on. Adults recognized faces even if they didn't know names. Reputation mattered. You carried your block with you wherever you went. Ethnic and cultural identities still shape daily life in visible ways. German influence lingered in food, festivals, and beer halls. Black neighborhoods held tight to church life, and kinship networks formed during the Great Migration. Appalachian roots showed up in music, speech, and work ethic. These identities weren't marketing tools or aesthetics. They were inherited realities, passed down without explanation. In the 1970s, Cincinnati neighborhoods felt steady, even when they were strained. Change hadn't fully uprooted them yet. They still believed in permanence. Streets remembered their people, and people trusted their streets. It was a city where routine created meaning, and where loyalty, once given, rarely left. What held Cincinnati together in the 1970s wasn't spectacle. It was ritual. The culture lived in repetition, in shared habits that didn't need explanation. Food wasn't about trends or experimentation. It was about identity. Chili wasn't a novelty or a joke yet. It was simply how people ate. Skyline and Gold Star weren't brands to argue over online. They were part of the weekly rhythm. Guetta on breakfast plates, beer at neighborhood halls, fish fries on Fridays. These were markers of belonging. Church festivals filled the calendar, Tents went up, rides came in, and entire neighborhoods showed out. You didn't need a reason beyond tradition. Downtown shopping still felt like an event. Department stores, window displays, crowds moving with purpose. Going downtown meant something. It wasn't just geography, it was participation in the city itself. Sports stitched everything together, and nothing mattered more than the Reds. The Big Red Machine wasn't just a team, it was civic validation. In an era when the country felt unstable, the Reds were dominance personified. Winning was expected. Riverfront Stadium filled with families, workers, kids, and old-timers who had seen enough to know when something was special. On game days, the city moved differently. Strangers talked to each other. Losses hurt. Wins felt communal. The Reds gave Cincinnati confidence without arrogance. They reminded people that this quiet, overlooked city could stand at the center of the national conversation. Not by yelling, but by performing. Baseball became common language. You didn't need to agree on politics, race, or direction to agree on the lineup. Food, festivals, and sports created a shared pulse. They cut across neighborhoods without erasing them. In the 1970s, Cincinnati still had unifying forces strong enough to override division, if only for a moment. The city gathered around tables and stadium seats, reinforcing the idea that despite differences, this place still moved as one. By the late 1970s, Cincinnati still worked, but something had changed in the air. Not loudly and not all at once. Just enough for people to feel it without naming it. The machines still ran, the paychecks still cleared, the neighborhoods still stood. But the certainty that had carried the city for decades was beginning to thin. Manufacturing pressure crept in quietly. Competition increased, costs rose. Suburbs started pulling families outward, promising newer homes, cleaner air, and distance from aging infrastructure. What once felt like progress now felt like separation. The city didn't empty overnight. It slowly redistributed itself. Racial tension and unequal opportunity were no longer invisible. They had always existed, but now they pressed harder against the surface. Neighborhood lines became sharper. Investment became selective. Some areas were protected, others neglected. The city's old promise of stability didn't land the same for everyone, and that imbalance began to shape what came next. Downtown and the riverfront started losing gravity. Stores closed earlier. Foot traffic thinned. Buildings aged without replacement. It wasn't collapse, not yet. But decline no longer felt impossible. The idea that the city would always function as it had was quietly questioned. That's what makes the 1970s such a pivotal memory for Cincinnati. It was the last era where stability was assumed, not defended. The last time most people believed the system would simply continue because it always had. Looking back, it feels like the final chapter, before a long transition, before loss, reinvention, and uneven revival. Cincinnati didn't fail in the 70s. It stood at the edge of change, unaware of how deep the change would run. And for those who lived it, that moment, solid, routine, and quietly confident, is what still lingers. If this series resonated with you, subscribe for more city deep dives like this. Stories about places before the shift, before the headlines, before the myths. And let me know, what city should we explore next?